I had this thought earlier today, and I'm curious to see if you've asked your dad the same question. Now, the question is, what was your upbringing like? What were the challenges you had to overcome? And how did they shape you to become the man you are today? Now, the chances are your father's upbringing was 10 times harder than the upbringing of young men today. Schools did not have whiteboards, smart tablets, calculators, and iPads. They didn't have any of that. If you wanted to find information and tackle knowledge, you had to walk to bookstores, you had to walk to libraries, you had to walk to public establishments to seek information yourself. And even then, you have to flip through dozens of books. It might even take all day to get the information you want. Nowadays, you can just look up on Google how to fold a paper airplane and get the exact answer you need. There's no way to make money online. If you want to make money, you have to go to your in-office job, commute, sit in traffic frustratingly for an hour, hour and a half, do the same thing when you come back. Global wars added a lot of pressure onto young men as they had to prepare their minds for, battle, physical endurance, leaving their families behind, and not being sure if they'd come back alive. They didn't have the ability to FaceTime with their loved ones if they were deployed. There were no iPhones back then. Hey, if you were bored, suck it up or find some entertainment along the way. If you want to kill time, find a deck of cards and play with your friends. You can't just hop on social media, scroll through Twitter, look at funny memes and videos, and then just go on with your life. It didn't work like that. Now, my father's story wasn't the greatest. Compared to today's standards, it was quite miserable, and not many people would have been able to handle the life that he had to go through. He first came to the United States in the 80s, the mid 80s. He was the only one out of all his family members to come to the States to try to pursue a career that's worthwhile and worth living for. He abandoned everything, essentially. None of his family members came with him. He didn't know anybody. He just had to settle down in a small community and find like-minded individuals that would help him achieve his dream. He lived in a small apartment, just ate rice and soy sauce every single day, tried to perfect his English, try to learn new skills. He used bus for transportation, in his off days, which he really didn't have. He would just spend time trying to build his business up. His life was just purpose, nothing else. There's no entertainment, there's no glory, there's no, amazing story time that he could have spent it on. There are some advantages to the lifestyle that he had to adopt. The advantages are he was just so dialed in that he eventually fulfilled his dream of becoming a business owner. But the journey along the way was so miserable that sometimes I think to myself, was it even worth it? Was it even worth it to just completely negate your social life and dial completely onto your work ethic? I don't know. I really don't know. Going from a well-knit community in South Korea where everyone looked the same, everyone dressed the same, everyone talked the same, everyone had the same interests, and then transitioning over to a world where there's just so much diversity, everyone was living their own independent lives, there's not much of a socially well-knit community. It was a really hard transition and everything seemed foreign to him. So even if he did have the free time, it was just impossible to connect with anybody. Kids growing up in the 21st century are surrounded by pleasure and comfort. Animals in the wild are actually repulsed by it. There's a case study done on a lizard by a psychologist from the University of Pennsylvania, Martin Seligman, right? The lizard was handed a cluster of food ranging from fruits, dead bugs, and pork. And the researcher wanted to see if the lizard would eat it. To his surprise, he didn't even touch it, he didn't even acknowledge it. But then one day, the researcher put a pile of newspaper onto the sample of foods, and then to his shock, the lizard started thrashing onto the newspaper, digging everything apart, and once he finally got to the prize, he ate it all. The conclusion is lizards are predators in the wild, and if they wanted to eat, they had to work for it. They had to chase down their prey, tear it apart into bits and pieces, and then they can consume. You can tie this concept to humans too. How come when you order Uber Eats and you eat your food, it just seems as if nothing happened? There's no satisfaction out of your meal. But when you're out in the wild, you're starving, you have a few weapons, and you go spearfishing for some salmon, it's so fun and satisfying, and it seems as if you've done something amazing, right? There's a phenomenon behind that. The effort-reward dynamic. Why can't we apply the same effort-reward dynamic to human beings? If we can apply this to animals in the wild, then it certainly applies to us too. You, as the focal point of your life, have to be introspective enough to see where that dissatisfaction is coming from, where that lack of ambition and purpose, where that source is creating all of this energy. We individually have to make small incremental changes in our lives to see where that unhappiness is coming from. And then at the end of the day, reflect and see if the progress we made throughout the entire day is worthwhile for us to sleep comfortably at night. I constantly compare my upbringing to my father's, and that is where my source of unhappiness comes from. I simply haven't done enough with all the resources and opportunities that have been given to me by the real world. I simply haven't capitalized enough with access to information, access to easy travel, access to like-minded individuals that I can connect with online. I haven't utilized any of these tools and resources. And me underperforming with all these resources given to me is the reason behind unhappiness. When you get home today, I want you to ask your father the same exact question. I promise you, you will learn a thing or two about yourself and see what you're lacking in.